I call the committee of the whole meeting for Monday, February 1st, 2021 to order. Roll call, please.
Trustee, Mayor Gaffino.
Here.
Trustee Carroll.
Here.
Trustee Curtis.
Here.
Trustee Gately.
Here.
Trustee Lowry.
Here.
Trustee Martinez.
Here.
And Trustee Salazar.
Here.
So under on audience comments, my thought was to have the audience under each item speak after staff gives their comments and report. So we'll try that. Any trustee comments? Okay, discussion. Item 1, Steve?
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Here's just a quick overview. Item number 1 is in regard to the 67-acre Valley Green development being proposed currently tonight. The developer is looking to put industrial warehousing on that property. This was held, there was a public hearing held at the Plan Commission meeting in January. The Plan Commission obviously reviewed it that same night. Tonight's review is regarding the potential development, the approvals that are needed, and the conditions that were discussed at the Plan Commission meeting. Tonight's goal is to solicit feedback from the village board on the proposal from the developer. And because of the size of this development and the amount of complicated parts to it and different approvals needed, sometimes we go straight to village board. It depends on really the comments and the concerns tonight. This could end up back at the committee of the whole for further discussion. Just putting that out there. And with that, Community Development Director Mike Toth is going to give us an overview of the actual proposal.
Thanks, Steve. I think we're going to go ahead and cue the PowerPoint. We're going to do a similar format we had done the Plan Commission meeting for those who were actually in attendance. So I'm going to go ahead and allow Opus to give their presentation tonight. There are a couple of slides towards the end of the presentation that I will speak to, and then we'll go ahead and open it up. So I'm not sure if Josh, if you're out there to give the presentation, or Mike.
Yep, thanks, Mike. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Yep.
All right, great. Well, good evening, trustees and staff, and thanks for having us. Josh Bauer here to present on behalf of Opus Development Company. I understand many of you were on the Plan Commission call January 5th, but we're going to attempt to move succinctly through the slide deck tonight to talk about the proposed redevelopment of the 59-acre Valley Green Golf Course, assembled with a vacant 7-acre parcel. It's currently owned as excess land by Euclid Beverage. As you're aware, on January 5th, we received a recommendation of approval from the Plan Commission, and we look forward to discussing the proposed development with the board and having a meaningful discussion this evening. So, Mike, you can go ahead and move ahead to slide 5. I'm going to skip through some of the Opus slides. We've done a lot, some work in the village before. Have a very good relationship, strong relationship with the village of North Aurora, and look forward to continuing that strong relationship. Opus is national developer. We've got 8 offices, so I'm not going to get too deep into that. I'm going to cover our project team. So if you can just go back 1 slide, Mike, or 2 slides, sorry. I'll just introduce one more. There you go. Just going to introduce the project team. So Mike Youngerman is on the call listening in. He's our Senior Vice President and General Manager, and Mike oversees all development for all product types. So student housing, senior housing, multifamily, and office, and obviously industrial. And Mike was primarily involved in the former Opus projects that were done in North Aurora, which I'll briefly touch on the next slide. Mike Robinson is on the call as well. Mike specifically focuses on industrial development, including entitlements and construction oversight and leasing, as do I. And then Matt Atchison is on the call, and you'll hear from Matt a little bit later to talk about the exterior elevations. Not included as part of the Opus team, but also part of the call and our presentation is Louie Abuna from KLOA. Louie is not going to present tonight. He presented at the Plan Commission and covered our traffic study, but he'll be available for Q&A should there be any questions about the traffic study. And then Jason Snyder, also on the call this evening, is our civil engineer from Jacob and Hefner. and he'll be available for any engineering related questions that should come up. Next slide, please. Thank you. So I mentioned a couple of former Opus projects in the village. 1200 Orchard Gateway was constructed in 2014 and has since been leased to Midwest Warehouse. After completing construction on 1200 Orchard, we broke ground on a second phase, 1100 Orchard Gateway in 2016, which has been leased to Glambia Performance Nutrition. So those projects have both been leased, generating significant taxes. And as I alluded to, we have really great working with North Aurora on those projects. We really believe in the community, hence, why we're looking to do this development and invest significant resources in the community. Next slide, please. So here's an aerial. The proposed project contemplates 3 buildings, and you'll be able to see those on the next couple slides. But 3 buildings which will be developed in 2 phases. The development is an assemblage of 2 parcels, the 59-acre Valley Green Golf Course, which is on the north part of the site, and a 7-acre parcel on the south side of the property, currently owned by Euclid Beverage. We understand Valley Green has been up for redevelopment in the past, but that developers had always struggled with access off of Route 31. So we strategically were able to incorporate the Euclid Beverage parcel into our plan, which now allows us to provide access to this development off of Overland Drive, and not require access off of Route 31. Next slide. So I just included this slide. We really were just trying to show, did a number of site plan studies with our architect, and our primary goal, and we talked about it a lot with the Plan Commission, was really to buffer this property as far from the residential as we could. So we've been able, if you look at the center face, the north face of Building B, heading directly north, you can see the 625-foot buffer that's there, as we tried to buffer this property as much as we could from those residences. You can go ahead to the next slide.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
Going back to the buildings B and C, which side of the building is facing residential? Is that the loading docks, or is that just parking?
So those are both cross dock buildings. Building B would be built first. Building C would be built in a future phase. So the north side of Building B would have the trailer docks facing the residential, and the south side would have them as well.
Why was it positioned that way? Because wouldn't you think that that's going to be more of a nuisance to the residential residents?
Yeah, so due to the size of the property and the size of the buildings that would be required to develop this property, we're looking at large institutional quality buildings. That's what the site calls for. And those particular buildings require that docks are on both sides of the building.
What do you have in the plans to remedy the noise, the lights, the exhaust, just the natural byproduct of the docks facing the residential?
Yeah, so we'll cover that. I'm planning to cover that a little bit later, but significant landscaping is really the one. Get sight lines is something that we paid really close attention to when we were working with our engineers and with the landscape architects to buffer this property. We understand that those residents were looking at a golf course before, and we're sensitive to that. So we've paid close attention to the landscaping, and as I alluded to before, just the distance, 625 feet. We've attempted to move these buildings as far away from those residents as possible, and I think ultimately you heard it at the Plan Commission meeting. Very few residents with concerns. We mailed this out, public notice, and there weren't very many residents that called in. So we are pleased with what we were able to accomplish with the plan.
What exactly are the hours of operation of, a business like this? Do they work overnight where perhaps semis could be heard and there could be some noise disturbance?
So with any speculative development, you don't know who the users are ultimately going to be. A lot of them are 8 to 5 or 7 to 4. You know, many of their trips are done during those hours. You know, one of the things that was talked about at the Plan Commission meeting, as they mentioned, you know, restrictions even on trucks, it's something that just doesn't work for us. Many of the tenants ask to have 24/7 access. It's a huge requirement in the leases that they have 24/7 access to these buildings. And so putting, you know, restrictions on that would forfeit the ability to attract some users. Although I do stand by the comment, I think many of these tenants do use the, you know, peak business hours for trucks, and that it really winds down after hours.
Well, I understand that, you know, the 24 access. I was just, you know, like with the other developments that seem to be a comparison to this one, you know, they're also in close proximity to some residential areas. I haven't heard anything that could be perhaps be of concern or raised by the residents in those areas. I think, you know, I was just curious to know if there was any measures that you guys take, and as far as noise, or you already answered the one with the landscaping. That makes perfect sense, right? But if you knew of anything else that could be done for that purpose, so nobody gets alarmed over perhaps a big development like that's being set up.
Understood, and we take it very seriously. So understand your comments and concern there. So back to the site plan here, you can see the 2 phases that we're proposing. So building A is 104,000 square foot. This is a rear load building immediately to the north of Overland Drive. So yeah, as we were discussing with the cross docks on buildings B and C, building A is a smaller building that we're able to put the loading docks facing the north side of the building and away from Overland Drive as a smaller building. Building B is on the northeast portion of the site. It's a 543,000 square foot cross dock building. And the future phase currently contemplates a 408,000 square foot cross dock building. As Mike Toth, and I think you've seen in your staff reports and as part of the conditions for approvals, we will be required to come back for building C for future site plan review and approval with the Plan Commission and the village board when we do complete or start construction on that building. Building A is going to have a dedicated access road off of Overland Drive for trucks, while buildings B and C are going to utilize the primary access road. One item I wanted to point out is that you know, we show emergency access on the northeast portion of the site, and that's emergency access that would be through a ComEd easement. So we're planning to construct the paved access road connecting to Willow Way, and we're just working to procure the easement from ComEd for that particular easement. You can go ahead to the next slide. So building A is I mentioned 104,000 square foot single load building, 32-foot clear height, which is designed at an ideal depth of 260 feet, which that's a great depth for single tenant users, but also provides us the ability to divide the building to 2 tenants should we need to. You know, having ultimate flexibility with these spec buildings is critical. So we've got a 104,000 square foot building. We could divide to as small as a 30,000 square foot or so user. And the rest of the building would lease for, you know, the balance of it, 70,000 feet. The emphasis on building A, as I mentioned, was to put the loading docks on facing away from Overland Drive and screening them. And as a result, the south elevation facing Overland Drive is going to have our office glazing, and you'll be introduced to that in a little bit when Matt Etchison submits or presents our elevations. The dedicated truck access road off Overland is ideal for tenants. It's going to help prevent truck bottlenecking on our primary access road that serves buildings B and C. You can go to the next slide, and I'll just quickly hit on some of the landscaping that we've got for Building A. We've placed 8 parkway trees on the south side of that property. So Building A is going to be part of the Tollway Park of Commerce, and we want to make sure we maintain the integrity of that business park and even improve it. So we've got trees facing overland there. An additional emphasis is being put on the east and west property lines. We want to make sure we've got significant screening to both Euclid Beverage and Pace Bus. So you'll be able to see that we've got some additional plantings there, and we're also working hard to maintain the existing trees that are there today. Next slide. So Building B contemplates the 543,000 square foot. This is a Class A bulk warehouse with 36-foot ceilings, and is designed to attract institutional tenants. As mentioned previously, we've pushed this building as far to the south of the property as we could. We've included a truck and car bypass road on the north, and maintained a 600+ foot buffer from the R1 district single family. Building B has been designed with a depth of 480 feet, which is also ideal for attracting single tenant users, but also can be, it could work for 2 tenants. So Building B gives us the flexibility that Building A had, and also Building B, because of the design of the property and how Building C is just to the west of it, Building B can actually be expanded to approximately 1 million square feet should a large user come and want to be here. So, we've included an abundance of car parking, land bank parking that could be added if there's users with a lot of employees. The bypass road on the north provides users the ability to fully secure the truck court. And our primary office is located in the southwest portion of the building with the ability to add a second office in the northeast portion of the building should we go to 2 tenants. Next slide. So the landscaping component for Building B contemplates very heavy emphasis on evergreens on the north side of the building. It's going to help provide screening from the R1 district that we all know is so important. So we've elected to propose evergreen trees in lieu of deciduous trees for their ability to screen year round, with very little to no gap at the bottoms as you would find with a deciduous tree. One thing to point out is the landscape plan only captures the plantings on our property, but a lot of the discussion that we've had with Mike Toth and staff is all of the trees that are on that ComEd easement, and we're going to make sure that we keep as much of those trees that's there to further buffer this property and keep sightlines to an absolute minimum. So we're also gonna make sure that plantings are on the east side of and the north side and the south side, sorry, of the property facing Euclid Beverage. As I mentioned on Building A, we really want to maintain screening from our neighbors, and so we're going to make sure that we do that with Building B.
Hey, Josh, can I ask a question real quick?
Yeah.
You said in the last slide that the Building B is capable of being expanded to 1 million square feet. How is that possible, or where would you expand?
Yeah, so you would take the west wall, and if you blow out the west wall, if someone was looking for 900,000 square feet, say, obviously we're here tonight for approvals for 543,000 square feet. So sure, we'd come back to you and say, hey, we've got XYZ company, they're going to create 1,000 jobs, whatever, and we would show you the plan, but it would blow out the west wall and it would go all the way down to the west property line. If you
Okay.
maybe it's easiest, Mike or Steve, if you go back to the site plan on slide 9, you can see it easier how the west side of Building B the building would just continue further west. And we've actually put together a concept plan for that scenario, which I believe has been shared with staff, that I'm sure we could send over to the village board for their review as well. It's purely conceptual. It just shows that this building could be expanded.
Okay, thank you.
Was that made clear to the building commission as well? the plan commission?
Yeah, in the event, what would happen is if they were to expand the building B, it would be considered a major change to the PUD, which would require a full public hearing again. So it would have to go through the actual full public hearing process in order to do that.
How is the property being marketed? Is it being marketed with potential of up to 1 million square feet?
So we have not yet begun marketing the property, but in theory, I believe that the property would be marketed as a 543,000 square foot building with the ability for expansion.
So it's being marketed or will be marketed as build to suit.
Well, it'll be an existing building, so it'll be a spec building with the ability to expand should there be a larger 900,000 square foot user that might want to be there.
And in your opinion, is there currently a demand for that size of a property?
No, I mean, you never know with e-commerce and the way everything's been going. I don't want to say no, but we've designed the site plan to attract the users that we want to get. But there are a lot of 900,000 square foot deals out in the marketplace, but it was simply too much risk to build that size of a building on spec.
Thank you.
Just
Josh, I had one question. How big are the evergreen trees that you're going to put on the north edge of the property? How big are they going to be at the time that you put them in?
Yeah, good question. And I would want to confirm, I believe those are 6-foot trees, the day that those are planted, and that they would grow a foot or two per year. So by the time, it takes some time to lease the building, 6-12 months. By the time the building was leased, those trees could be as tall as 8 foot. But I would want to confirm that for sure. I believe they're at least 6 feet. They may be 8, but I think they're 6-foot trees.
Okay, thank you.
And is that parking lot on the north side, is that like below grade? Is there like a drop off there?
I believe that, and Jason Snyder's on the call, who would be best. And actually, he's sending me a note right now, so I may be able to answer this right now. Jason, feel free to chime in. I know we've got the topo and our grading plan's been done, so I know we know.
Yeah,
that,
the grades on the north side of the building would be give or take 4 feet below the floor elevation of the building itself, and the sloping down towards the pond towards the north from that point.
Okay.
I just have one comment about the pine trees up there, whatever you have up there for screenage. That I think we can all probably agree that, protecting the neighbors up there on that north side is crucial. I'm not sure if you have enough there. I mean, it looks nice on the drawing here, but it's going to take 10 to 15 years for those spruces and pines to get 20 feet across, and where they deaden the noise and the headlights. So I just like to make a note of that I think a lot of the existing scrub stuff that's underneath the power lines is just junk trees, and they don't, they do some blocking in the summer, but I like to pack more of that in there. I just don't think that's enough what you have there. They'll look nice, but I don't think it'll serve the residents there too well. So that's my comment.
And is there fencing on the north side?
There's not fencing. One of the challenges is with the power line, the ComEd easement, the power lines, and the detention. There's not a ton of room over there. We are going with the landscaping buffer, not an actual fence. There may be should the tenant require security, they may be looking to put a fence up on the north side of the property. But as of now, there would be no fence going in day one.
And Mark, the Plan Commission, one of the conditions, which I'll go over later, was that in the event that they do put fencing in, that it would have to come back before the Plan Commission board for site plan approval.
Yeah, we don't want like a chain link fence up there like the other one.
Yeah, I would like to at least match what we required on off of what is that, Orchard Gateway?
Yes.
Yeah, it currently calls for site plan with the Plan Commission, but then that's obviously those conditions are subject to amendment.
All right, great. So slide 14, I'll continue on now with the, this is building C. So this is the future building, future phase that we talked about. So it's been well thought out and it's been designed as well to provide strong buffering from the R1 district and ultimately provide flexibility to accommodate 1 or 2 tenants similar to building B. And we've got ample parking, ability to expand the parking on the west side as well. So another good building. And as I said before, we'll come back to the Plan Commission and the Village Board for approvals on building C.
Can you tell me too, again, on the parking lot, how far is that north parking lot, the north tip of it to the street, I guess? Was that 600 feet? Did you mention that before? Or was that from the building to the property line, or?
Yeah, so the 625 feet was from the north dock wall on building B to the residential. The residential gets further away from this parcel as it goes further west.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's going to be a larger number. I don't have the number in front of me, but it should be upwards of 675, around 700 feet, because it is further west and the residences do get further away.
All right, thanks.
Next slide, I'll just more of the same here, but building C also contemplates a continuation of the heavy greenery and evergreens that are included on the north side of building B. And also, as mentioned before, Pace Bus to the west of us. So we're going to continue the heavy screening and landscaping to the west of the building as well to protect Pace. Lue Abuna is on the call, but out of respect for the board, I've asked that he just be available for Q&A. So you've seen the traffic report, the traffic study, and I think he'll be available for questions should there be any. But the most important things that I just wanted to cover, the majority of the traffic, trucks and cars, are going to be coming from 88, heading northbound on Route 31, making a left and heading west on Airport Road, and then reaching the property via Overland Drive, and then exiting the same way. There will be some folks coming to and from the property from the north side on Route 31 and making a right-hand turn onto Airport Road, but the majority we anticipate coming from 88. The traffic study itself, it's long. I'm not sure, I'm not going to get too into depth on it. Lue will be available, but basically all of the intersections are now operating an acceptable level of service. And our proposed development will continue to keep those intersections operating at the same level of service, which is all you can hope for. So we're pleased with the findings on the traffic study. Should there be any questions on that, let's hold those to the end, and then Lue can speak to them. I'm going to skip ahead now to slide 19, which is our elevations, and ask that Matt Etchison present the board with these for buildings A and B. Matt may be muted. Let's see.
Is it Etchison was the last name?
Yeah, Etchison.
Doesn't appear to be muted.
Hello?
There he is.
We hear you.
You hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
All right. I apologize for that. Had a minute to get myself unmuted there. But thank you very much for the opportunity here. As
We lost him. He's back on mute.
He's not muted by what I can see on this side of the Zoom.
Huh.
Give him one more minute here, 30 seconds. If not, we can have Matt speak to those elevations once he gets his the technology working again.
Okay, I'm gonna try again. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Hopefully, I have this corrected. I'm speaking through a VoIP phone on my computer, so I think I'm having a little bit of a disconnect here, but hopefully it maintains the volume from here on out. Let's see here. Okay, so I'll start from the beginning. I don't know whether you heard it or not. I introduced myself as Matthew Etchison, an architect with the Opus Group, as Josh kind of led in before. The building that you see on this first slide here, Building A, shows a single loaded industrial building. It's suited for up to 2 users. It's constructed of smooth painted precast concrete panels with horizontal reveals and accents and horizontal and vertical paint colors. The color scheme for the buildings in this park are kind of a muted modern selection of primarily whites and grays. The south elevation facing Overland Drive has 2 potential tenant entrances, highlighted by tall areas of storefront glass, and each have a protected metal canopy that comes out over the entrance. Each entrance is accented by a vertical precast wing wall that's in a complementary blue paint color and is further distinguished from the larger warehouse volume with vertical step backs in the precast panels that define the office functions and kind of break down the scale of the building. Both office areas allow in a lot of natural daylight through a combination of storefront glazing and punched square window openings in the precast walls. And there's a strategic color blocking of whites and grays measured across and around the sides of the elevation that help to break up visually the length of the warehouse walls and to highlight the locations of clear story windows and the exit doors. The loading docks for Building A are located on the north elevation facing away from Overland Drive. And this building is just shy of 39 feet at its highest point near the offices on the south side of the building. It has a single pitched roof that drains towards the truck dock where stormwater is collected through internal downspouts and overflow scuppers. And as the roof slope decreases towards the north, the precast wall panels step down on the east and west elevations to their lowest point of about 34 feet, which is along the north dock wall. And next slide, please. So this elevation for Building B, it complements the design of Building A, and it is just interpreted for a cross-dock building of a larger format. Building B will have primary offices located on its southwest corner, closest to and visible from Overland Drive. The industrial building is suited for up to 2 users with a secondary entrance possible on the northeast corner. The building is also constructed of smooth painted precast concrete panels with a similar horizontal reveal and painted accents as described before in Building A. It complements Building A with a similar modern palette that anchors it to the business park. The west elevation faces the new access road and is the primary elevation for occupants to park and enter the primary tenant office on the southwest corner. The tenant entrance includes areas of storefront glass and metal wrapped protective canopies, similar to Building A, and it is also accented by a vertical blue precast wing wall for wayfinding. Building B proposes to support a larger office function, the footprint for which is distinguished from the larger warehouse with vertical step backs in the precast panels. The office allows in natural daylight through a combination of storefront glazing and punched window openings. Color blocking is used across and around the sides of the elevations to break up the visual length of the warehouse walls and highlight the locations of clear story windows and exit doors. Along the dock walls, a combination of vertical and horizontal stripes and reveals, in addition to vertical plane changes in the precast parapet height, help break up the length of the loading dock walls. Building B is 43 feet at its highest point, which is in the middle of the east and west elevations. It has a double pitched roof that controls stormwater down to internal drains along the dock walls. And this strategy decreases the precast wall panel heights so that at the truck courts, they're at a low height of 38 feet. So thank you for your time. Appreciate the opportunity to share these with you.
Thanks, Matt. Mike Toth, that should conclude our presentation. So with that, I will turn it over to you for slides 21 and 22.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. Just go ahead and take that from here. So there are a total of 4 items for consideration that were before the Plan Commission. The first being to rezone the golf course property from the R1 single family district to the ORI research and light industrial zoning district. The Euclid property, the 7 acres that was pointed out earlier, already has the ORI zoning designation, so it would be for the golf course only. The zoning of the ORI is aligned with the comprehensive plan as set forth in 2015 for the future land use designation for office industrial. The requested ORI zoning is consistent with the properties to the south in the Tollway Park of Commerce, so we can kind of see a natural progression of the Tollway Park of Commerce to the north. The proposed use of the buildings, the warehousing, distribution, and storage use is a permitted use within the ORI district. So there's no special use for the actual use itself, as it would be permitted under the ORI zoning as proposed. The second item is a special use to allow the plan unit development with deviations to the zoning and subdivision ordinances. Basically, it's required to be a PUD because the zoning ordinance requires any non-residential development over 2 acres to be a PUD, which is adopted via special use. The deviations included are the number of landscape trees, the lot width for lot 2, the loading space orientation, and the sanitary sewer extension, which is a portion of the subdivision ordinance. There's more information in the staff reports regarding those items. The third item being site plan approval. This is also required of new development for industrial development properties that they obtain site plan approval as part of that prior to building permit issuance. And the preliminary final plat, which includes a 3-lot subdivision, for which would establish lots 1, 2, and 3 for buildings A, B, and C. Lot 2 access would be to Overland Drive. Lot 3 access would be through Lot 2 through Overland Drive. And as Josh explained earlier, Lot 1 would be building A, which has access already off of Overland Drive, or would have access. Next slide, please.
Hey, Mike.
Yeah.
Not to interrupt, but what was the comprehensive plan? What did they have slated for this area?
Office industrial.
Office industrial, okay.
Correct. All right. So we are starting with, these were the staff generated conditions, and I'll kind of go through them briefly. A lot of the comments that I've heard tonight are involving the use itself. You know, the warehousing, storage, distribution use is fairly benign. And as Josh pointed out to you, there's some circumstances that push the buildings further to the south away from the residential, which we're trying to be cognizant of. The first one was mentioned earlier is that site plan review required for building C. So if they want to develop building C, they'd have to come back to the process for final site plan review. A building permit shall be issued for a guardhouse. So one of the things we've experienced with some of the other warehouse and distribution uses, as the location of the guardhouse can tie up the site, meaning that it can cause backups or having to have trucks stack and wait and queue. So that way we want to work with them on each individual guardhouse so we can work through the traffic to make sure that the site stuff, it flows steadily and there are no backups as a result of the location of the guardhouse. All businesses shall be conducted within the confines of the building. That's a use standard included in the zoning ordinance. A photometric plan is to be required. That way we can ensure there's no trespass or light spillage, you know, primarily to the adjacent properties. There is to be a tree preservation plan. So any tree of good quality that is 6 inches in diameter, when measured 12 inches off the ground, would be marked for preservation. We had to evaluate the preservation as needed. As Josh mentioned earlier too, there is a hedge of trees that exist on the ComEd property. Now, I don't know if necessarily if anyone has the right to go out and cut down those trees, the hedgerow. It does provide screening. And the point with the evergreen trees was to sort of fill in the gaps with the existing hedgerow. So we're making sure that remains. And I don't know if ComEd would be willing to part with that as part of the development. But the approach was, as opposed to putting a stark wall in place that would have more an industrial impact or feel in the surrounding area that could collect garbage, was to maintain the natural aesthetic as much as we could. Obviously, it was a golf course at one point. We're trying to do landscape buffering with trees and what's with the topography out there, as opposed to doing a wall that could have some negative ramifications down the road.
Hey, Mike, on that hedgerow though, I think they are mostly deciduous. That was my only concern is, it's going to take 10 years for the headlights go away or the noise. So I just thought extra effort or thought on that, which can be done, to kind of alleviate that. I don't think anybody was talking about, I wasn't talking about removing anything there, but wintertime or from, November through May, you got nothing, from the deciduous stuff. So just a thought.
Yeah, a lot of them were deciduous to begin with. We worked together to load the evergreens to the north as many that we could. Obviously this is just for discussion tonight. So going back with the developer would be to revisit the number of evergreen trees that would be present along the northern portion of the property, whether it's moving what's around there or adding additional trees where the space would allow.
Thanks.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Why couldn't we do some sort of a screening like they do along homes that back to the expressway, those sound blocking barriers? I mean, is there any way we could use a product like that? Because then that way we're giving screening as well as sound mitigation.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what the cost of it, and not to make it a matter of dollars and cents, given the enormity of the project. That is something that was brought up with them. I look at it as trying to preserve it naturally. If you have,
it is trying to preserve property value. I mean, we have people that already were living across from a somewhat mitigated adverse condition. They lived across the street from power lines, but then they had the golf course, so that mitigated the power lines to some extent. Now they're going to be living across from power lines and a distribution center. So, my concern is the reduction in value to those residential properties. And I know that you said no, but not a lot of people showed up, but I do a lot of work in that neighborhood. And I know for a fact that a lot of those homes are rentals. So I'm not surprised there haven't been a lot of complaints, because how do we know the owners actually got the letter and not the tenant? So my concern is for the drop in property values. I mean, if there's anything we could do besides just putting some trees up that's going to mitigate the adverse conditions that are now going to exist, I mean, that should at least be talked about.
Thank you. Yeah, was looking at some of the properties and some of the industrial areas in town and that do have fencing, and I just really get a picture of we have a lot of garbage collection with the wind blowing, and it can have some negative. So that's why we took the route of looking in more of the natural direction at this point. So as we have right now is that the vehicular access will be limited to Overland Drive with restricted access off of Willow Way. As the site plan alluded earlier, that the Willow Way would not be an open entrance to the site. It would not be reserved for employees or trucks. It would only be used for emergency situations. Obviously, the last thing we want to do is have additional traffic down Willow Way. So everything would go through Overland Drive. So in the experience that we've had with some of the other users in town is that, air braking, idling trucks, creating additional noise. So put in here the condition of any parking or idling of trucks in the bypass lanes. So the bypass lanes are, located in areas that are more adjacent to the adjacent residential to the north. So what we want to do is limit the impact of those trucks, and by limiting how they can be used and delineating potentially with signage or working with management to make sure that they understand that those are moving bypass lanes, not for parking and or idling, because those do present challenges. So we want to make sure we made that clear. Basically working with on-site management to making sure that any light, sound, or odor emissions are kept to a minimum. And working with other users, we've found that working with management through those items and working with their deliveries and their consultants as to limiting those impacts has worked in certain situations. So we just want to make sure we include that as a condition. The construction traffic be located off of Overland Drive with emergency access through Willow Way. Obviously, any construction traffic should not impede the ability of the fire and village police to provide service to the property. And just the standard boilerplate condition that any dumpsters on site be screened for the zoning ordinance. As Steve mentioned earlier, the public hearing was held on January 5th. The Plan Commission did recommend approval. They actually added 4 conditions, which I'll go through. I did actually want to add a 5th condition. We looked in the Overland Drive as to adding a sidewalk, and I did speak with the developer today about adding that as a condition. So, and they were agreeable to it. There is a sidewalk continuation from the Euclid property, and then there's a piece that picks up at Pace Bus Stop, which goes to the northwest into their property. So we do want to add that as a condition as well, which they were agreeable upon. The additional conditions that were added by the staff report was that any dead landscaping be removed and replaced in a timely manner with species indicated on the landscape plan. This is something that is required regardless of a condition. If anything on the landscape plan is dead or dying, that it would be replaced per that plan. Again, site plan approval needed from the Plan Commission for the issuance of a fence permit. And again, that was the Plan Commission. If the board wants the final say in fencing too, we can certainly add that. Any rooftop heating, ventilation, or air conditioning equipment visible from any adjacent property or right-of-way shall be screened by architectural element by at least 6 feet from any supporting wall of the building to allow safe access to the roof by the fire department. This is something that's required by the zoning ordinance inherently, but it was added as a condition. Lastly was the village shall open dialogue regarding cross access between the 314 Kingswood Drive property and the properties located directly to the east. At the Plan Commission, legal representation for the Slaker family, who owns the 24 acres to the east, was in attendance. And at that point in time, they had made suggestion that they would like to have access through the golf course property to Overland Drive, out to Airport Road, and that if there was no access granted, then it would have an adverse impact on his client's property, the development of his property in the future. So I'm not sure if he's on the call or not, but I did want to make that put that out there. The parties did meet. We did have a meeting last week with the legal representation in the Opus group, and the village was in attendance as well. There were no immediate resolution on the issue at that point. It is ongoing discussions. We made sure everyone exchanged contact information to keep any conversations going, as those both are private properties, and the current configuration on the proposed property of the golf course is private roads and access drives. So there are no public roads at that point. So with that, I don't know if the village board has any questions of the petitioner or staff. I'm willing to.
Hey, Mike,
Yeah.
Mark, I know that you spent a lot of time on this with Opus. Opus to me is a quality developer contractor. They've built in our village and did an outstanding job. They bring in a lot of tax revenue, outstanding work. And I just want to tell that to you because I don't think we say it enough. I like the conditions that you placed in. I like the access. I love the elevations and the setbacks. I think it's going to be a great addition to North Aurora.
Thanks, Mark.
I would like to, we talked a lot about the concern about noise, and I would like to see a condition on the hours. I know the petitioner spoke to that and said that it would be difficult to market to a tenant, but here, when they presented the Opus building and Orchard Gateway so many years ago, they talked about how limited there was the number of these buildings along 88. I would imagine that's even more so now. So I don't really think that it's an issue getting a tenant. These two buildings are going to be the closest that in that entire park to residential. So I would like to see a condition that the hours of, there's no loading and unloading during certain hours.
Are you saying just access to the site or loading and unloading?
No, just loading and unloading. I mean, they could have access to the site, but no loading after 10 o'clock or 9 o'clock at night or something like that.
Maybe on the north side, if that, that's a side that really is going to be an issue for those people over there.
Right.
Well, don't they come in off of Overland Drive? There's no access off Willow Way.
No, but they pull around, don't they?
Then they're gonna face north. Headlights are gonna go to north with the noise and then back in. Yeah. They are though, from the back of that building to 600 and some feet. So it's at 2 football fields from the property line. So I mean, it is a pretty good distance back there, but.
Yeah, Josh, I
Set
don't know.
back quite.
Go ahead, Mark.
No, I just looking at it. It looked like it's pretty well set back as far as you can go to the south.
I
I don't
know.
know.
My feeling is they can always, if they get a tenant that really needs 24-hour access, they can always come back and ask to amend the PUD. But if we don't put it in there, we're done. You know, we can't unring the bell.
Yeah, I kind of like that, that Mark is saying, you know, although I think that, with the landscape, if they put the right landscape in there, it's going to help out a lot, you know, and, the buffer that they have with all of the, spacing in between. I mean, I think that just in case, to be on the safe side, you know, like Mark said, there's always a chance to make an amendment, you know, and grant them that permission, right? But if for some reason it's not, and there is some complaints, we're kind of a little too late. And I kind of see why it's probably a good idea to have that safety precaution and add it on. But considering their construction and the other projects, I don't see how it would even be an issue for them. They were pretty good projects and outstanding.
Yeah, one of the conditions of approval with regard to idling and parking, this came from the Liberty properties, which are now owned by Prologis on Mitchell Road. The complaints that we received on there, they don't have anywhere close to the setbacks that this property would have. They have the Nicor easement that does have some evergreens on it. I mean, that their access drive on the north portion of that property is very close to the townhomes, the Chesterfield townhomes there. We did receive complaints, you know, regarding the trucks parking and idling on that access drive. Nothing regarding noise at a later hours, but that condition was specific to some of the issues that we dealt with from the Liberty property on Mitchell Road. So that was, again, if I had you know, any sort of comment or anything regarding the loading and unloading times, I would have put that. But that specifically did come from the Liberty property. Josh,
Great project. Good job.
and Josh, I don't know if that would be a condition, if that would have any impact on if you could offer anything with regards to your prospective tenants.
Yeah, sure. We appreciate Mark's comments. As you know, one of the things I mentioned in the Plan Commission meeting, these tenants, especially tenants, you know, institutional tenants, require 24/7 access to the building. They're investing a significant amount of money and resources in these buildings, with significant build outs inside of the buildings, and they want to make sure that they can get in and out of the building when they need to. Their normal operations may be 8 to 5, but they may need to get to the building after hours. So, you know, any sort of restriction on when they could access the building is going to be a major issue. It's going to put us in a position where, you know, when we negotiate with tenants, that we can't get tenants, even if those tenants aren't working in those hours. So what I would ask is that you know, if there's any issues, these tenants want to work with the municipalities that they're in. If there's any issues at all, we completely understand that these residents have the right to quiet enjoyment of their homes. But if there's any issues, you know, a conversation with the user, rather than just putting the blanket restriction on, because I know how difficult that'll make it to lease these buildings, just because we've gone through it a number of times. And it's always something that the brokers negotiate for their users is 24/7 access. So it's just if it were easy, we'd say, of course, we totally get it. We get your position. I'd ask that it not be conditioned. It would be something that if there's any issues with how these users are utilizing the building, that a conversation be had at that point. And I know, that they'll work with you. There's noise ordinances. We're going to make sure we're following all of that. So that's all I would ask.
No, Trustee
Well,
Carroll, were you referring to the actual loading and unloading or just access? Because the way I see it right now, you had loading and unloading, putting specific hours to that, and primarily along the north side of it looks like would be building B at this point, building C.
Well, I guess my question to you would be, what's the difference? I mean, access to me means just getting in and out of the building. Unloading and unloading is workers working all out 24/7. That's what I'm trying to avoid. If trucks back in at midnight and a forklift operator is there unloading a truck on the north side, that's going to, when it's really quiet in the middle of a field, that's going to cause a lot of noise that's going to carry into the neighborhood. That's what I'm trying to avoid.
Yeah, so and that's why it's more of a poignant question, just because the use itself for the use standard for the warehousing distribution use requires that all operations be conducted within the building. Josh, in your experience too, is that all the loading would be done primarily in the interior building, correct?
Sorry, Mike, say that again. The loading?
Yeah, with the loading and unloading of commodity be all done within the inside of the building when the trucks pull in the dock? There wouldn't be any unloading outside of the facility, correct?
That's right. You're not permitting outside storage. So these trucks are not picking up product that's sitting out in the parking lots. They're backing up to the truck, to the apron, to the dock wall, and the product's actually just being loaded directly into the truck. Opus built a number of bulk, distribution buildings, all different types of users. But, Mark, a lot of these users, as I said before, they're 8 to 5, but in certain times a year, especially with, e-commerce, we just leased a building to Target, certain times a year, they've got huge orders that they need to fill. So they may need to work after hours for a couple of days, for maybe a couple of weeks. And, those types of restrictions are very difficult when trying to attract those users.
Yeah, so
You
I
know
would
what,
say,
Mike? I wasn't actually objecting to a restriction of usage or access. On my end, I understand that a lot of these places, they have to have access one way or another. Most of their forklifts, they don't have a force, two-side, motorized engines, right? With combustion engines, they have gas where they are more quiet. They work inside. The loading docks have some sort of seal around the semi trucks or whatever containers. But I was more thinking about some sort of noise ordinance to protect the people around it more than an access ordinance. It's like an access ordinance for a place like this really, to me, doesn't make a lot of sense because, like you said, most of the work is conducted inside the building, and I do believe it will hurt them, especially in off seasons where they may have to work overnight or after hours. But from that standpoint, I was more thinking about some sort of noise ordinance that we can perhaps crack on. Although in the past, we have had situations with Opus group, and they were excellent in mediating the uses of a fence. Remember where we have to change the fencing and a lot of other things. So I have no doubt in my mind that they always have been cooperative with us and other residents around them. So that's where I kind of lean on, or perhaps just a noise or ordinance over a access restriction.
Yeah, thank you, Tal. Yeah, and I wanted to point that one out too, because I want to make sure that the petitioner is aware of that condition and what that entails. Work being done within the building. The way I see it is they pull up, everything is loaded and unloaded out inside the building. The way I see it, if it's not, it's in violation of will be the third condition that's listed in the staff report. Whether it be dropping pallets or anything like that. Obviously, there would be some element of refuge, but I just want to make sure that they're aware too, is that that's what that means. So hopefully, if this were to be approved, that these conditions hopefully would be, maybe, I don't know, to a certain extent codified in some sort of lease language, but making sure that is adhered to, because yeah, I think the proximity to the residential to the north is sort of paramount here, and that's where all these conditions come from, is basically all with respect to that.
Yeah, I would just echo the sentiment of Trustee Martinez. I think, Trustee Carroll is looking to protect those residents, and we completely understand and agree with that. I think the use restriction is a really difficult one for us, but noise ordinances we're going to comply with and make sure that we work and make sure that the property lines are not producing noises over those the allowable levels. So I think we'd prefer to see that than any type of use restriction or access restriction for these tenants.
There are sound requirements in the village code. So we've actually had to go out with code enforcement and measure sounds of businesses at a certain point in time. So that is something that we would monitor. Obviously, this is being a little bit of a different animal, considering the trucks are sort of coming and going. But obviously, this is of a concern here. So maybe we can circle back with the petitioner to come up with something that would work, to appease their ability to obtain tenants, but also to working with the village board and working with the village, making sure that any sort of impacts are minimal with respect to the adjacent residential.
And Mike, I just want to confirm your comments earlier. We have no plans for outside storage or outside activity beyond truck maneuvering. So that's something that we're fully aware of.
Yeah, the outdoor storage would require separate special use. So that's not a part of this as well. Obviously, there are a lot of uses back in the Toy Park of Commerce that do have appreciable storage that does generate noise. But obviously, I anticipate any sort of noise being, a byproduct of the trucks themselves. So it's imperative working with the future operations management team for each of the tenants to make sure that they're aware of this and they're abiding by it. That's in our experience has been the most critical element.
Are we good for now then? Should we open up for audience comments? Do we have anybody that would want to speak in this area? Dave?
Mayor, I don't see anyone with their hand up, and no one's contacted me in the chat asking to speak.
Okay.
Is everyone muted right now, Dave, or?
I have my hand up.
Okay, Bruce would like to speak.
Okay.
Thank you. Mayor and members of the Board of Trustees. My name is Bruce Goldsmith. I'm with the Dykema Law Firm. I represent the Slaker Family Trust, which owns a property immediately east of this development. If you could put up the site plan aerial, which shows, or just the aerial, so we can get, why don't we start with just the aerial right there. So the dark green immediately east or to your right of the site is the Slaker property. Over the course of the last 10 or 12 years, either the owners of the golf course property and the Slaker property have presented plans to the village for a multiple building industrial warehouse type of product. And in every case, those developments have had an access road along the north side of the property because of the inability to get access to Route 31. And what had been discussed numerous times over that 10 or 12 year period with all national developers of the same high quality as Opus is that the only possible access when the UCAD property was not in play was to go west of Poplar Place and come down to Airport Road. And there was, I think there was a plan at various times for what would take to upgrade Poplar. It was not a huge expense, but it did take some commitment from the village to do that. Every one of those projects walked away because they couldn't get the kind of commitment they needed to go forward. If you go to the site plan, which shows the adjacent property, please. Maybe the colored one. Well, that's good enough for now. So the problem with this plan is, if you look at the northeast corner of the site, which is to your top right-hand side, where the little red line is. So the Slaker property is immediately to the east. If that bypass road along the north side of the property were brought forth to the property line and a cross-access easement was provided, then the Slaker property would have an outlet that would go through the bypass down the center of the property to Overland. One of the problems with that is tonight, what was described is that it's possible that building B would be combined with building C, and that would cut off that access down the middle of those two properties to Overland Drive. So that's one difficult proposition. The other thing is that under your zoning ordinance for adoption of the special use, there's two conditions that are particularly relevant to this discussion. The first is, and I'll just quote them because they're short. The proposed special use will not significantly diminish the safety, use, enjoyment, and value of other property in the neighborhood in which it is located. And secondly, the proposed special use is compatible with development on adjacent or neighboring property. The problem, and this was, I think, identified by members of the Plan Commission, is without access through this site, Slaker property can't be developed. It will not have full access to Route 31. It won't have access through the site. It will be landlocked for any successful development. And like I said, over the last 10 years, somewhere between 8 and 10 national developers have looked at these two properties. They've all proposed plans for the properties.
Excuse me, not to interrupt, but why would the Slaker property be landlocked? It's got frontage on 31.
Because for the highest and best use, it needs to have full access, and the frontage, the current alignment of, well, the current width of the roadway does not accommodate a full access. And in prior presentations to this board, we were strongly indicated that the village was not comfortable having substantial new truck traffic on Route 31. So we've always looked to the combined site, and this is the first time the sites haven't been combined in a proposal to the village. But in order to protect the viability of the site for future development, there has to be a way to get through the Opus property down to Overland and then eventually to Airport Road. So this special use can't meet those two conditions under the present plan without making an accommodation to allow that cross access so that the Slaker property has a way to get full access to a roadway. And that full access would ultimately be down to Airport Road.
I respectfully disagree. I think that part of the reason that full access was discouraged in the past before this board is because the whole property, both properties were being looked at together. Slaker's property is significantly smaller and would have significantly less truck traffic than the two parcels together along Route 31. The other problem I have is you're kind of asking this board to get in the middle of a private dispute. I mean, shouldn't Bill and Opus or whoever the property owner is negotiate this in a private matter, in a private easement agreement? Why should the board get involved?
So I have two comments. One, on Route 31, we were involved in extensive discussions with IDOT, and IDOT would not allow access to Route 31 of the kind needed to handle truck traffic unless there was an additional lane added, which have to be added on the west side of the property because of the utilities that are currently already embedded on the east side of Route 31. In order to do that, it would be necessary to acquire land from Commonwealth Edison and Everest College in order to get the acceleration and deceleration lanes that are necessary to get full access to Route 31. That project was a minimum of $5 million, and that was several years ago. And that kind of cost would make it would be impossible to attract a user to the site who would have that kind of upfront cost. We talked about the village committing TIF dollars to that, and that never seemed to be an opportunity. So we're in a situation where we can't get full access to Route 31. Right in, right out is going to be meaningless for any kind of successful development. And the only use that anyone has ever proposed for the site through multiple national developers is office research industrial, like the property to the west. So that makes it's confiscatory from the standpoint of making the improvements to Route 31, assuming we could acquire the land. And in answer to your second question, it's typical in developments of this kind that require special use to impose conditions that may benefit adjacent property owners, particularly in this case, when this may be the only way in which ORI development can be fostered. So it is not a negotiation between private parties. It's a negotiation between the village and the developer to ensure that you don't end up in a situation that, one, diminishes the value of the adjacent property, which it would greatly diminish, and two, which is compatible with development of adjacent property, which for ORI purposes needs full access. And the only way to get full access is to allow circulation through the Opus site.
I'd like to hear from Kevin Drendel. Kevin, are you out there? Can you give us some insight on the village's obligation regarding this?
Well, I've given it a lot of thought and have actually done some research because of these matters that have been raised for us. And I figured that I might have to weigh in. So these are the things that I note. First off, the comp plan for the village identifies the Valley Green property for the office and industrial use, but it identifies mixed use commercial for the Slaker property. The comp plan hasn't changed, even though there've been a number of proposals that have come through. Of course, those were initiated by the property owners, not by the village. And you know, any property owner obviously has the right to you know, make an application or an inquiry about a change in zoning. But the village comp plan distinguished different uses on the two properties. To a certain extent, I suppose someone could say that the inability to work something out with a combined development on the two properties suggests that maybe a combined development wasn't viable. I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there. Of the special use standards that are required to be considered by the board, none of them are controlling. So those are the factors. The two that were mentioned along with all the other factors are to be considered in making a determination, but no one factor is controlling. And oftentimes when making these land use decisions, they compete with each other. There may be some tension. A particular proposal may meet some of those factors and may not meet others of those factors. So it's always kind of a weighing and balancing of those factors, or not always, but often it is. You know, sometimes there's positive and negative aspects when you look at those factors. So again, you kind of have to weigh them and make a decision based on the totality of the whole. You know, there's been an assertion that development of the Opus property will harm the Slaker property. You know, I think there's a counter position there as well that has to be acknowledged, that the development of the Opus property doesn't change anything for the Slaker property. It doesn't take anything away and it doesn't add anything. Slaker property doesn't have access to the west now. It has access on 31, that won't change. Obviously, the opportunity of combining uses and gaining access to the west through the combined use, which requires the, you know, before was presented to us as you know, an agreement. You know, that opportunity is not being presented with this particular proposal, but, you know, as somebody pointed out, that's, you know, kind of the nature of private arrangements. And, you know, we don't necessarily, for the most part, you know, we don't get involved in private arrangements like that. You know, there certainly is some consideration to the fact that, and we certainly should consider the potential detriment, potential diminishment in value. You know, the harmony, whether it's consistent with development, you know, that's adjacent or in the neighborhood, those certainly are factors that we need to consider, and it's right to consider those. So I certainly don't disagree with that at all. I note, you know, along those same lines, if we did require access that would go along the north property line on that bypass road, potentially we're actually bringing more adverse impact to the residential properties to the north. So that kind of cuts both ways. If we were talking about public roads, I think we would have to consider, and there would be a strong argument that access should be required. It's, you know, kind of a part of natural planning that we often require stubbing, or we require roads to be built in conjunction with future public roads that we anticipate. But we don't have a proposal with a public road here. It's a private road, so it's a different animal. You know, the access that's being sought would potentially put some additional burden onto a private road. The Opus has indicated that they have not designed the road to accommodate more traffic than what they've built it for, and they don't agree to it. You know, we did have that meeting, and Opus doesn't agree as a matter of consent to provide that access. So we would have to be imposing a condition on them that they don't agree with, which of course, you know, we do that with special uses, and we do that, you know, where we think it's appropriate and necessary to protect the public and to protect adjoining properties, so that, you know, there's nothing unusual necessarily in that. I have a concern. You know, when we impose conditions like that, there's a requirement that our imposition of a condition be something that's uniquely and specifically and uniquely attributable to a burden caused by the development that is being requested for approval. And I don't know that I see here that there's some burden being imposed that isn't kind of part of the nature of the property. Again, the Opus development isn't going to change anything for the Slaker property. It will exist exactly as it does now. Of course, an opportunity that exists now won't exist in the future if it goes forward, but that's not necessarily a harm that's caused by the development. So, and then a couple other comments. To a certain extent, and this seems to be one of Opus's biggest points of of concern is that they don't know what would possibly be built on the Slaker property, what kind of traffic it might generate, and therefore what kind of burden it might impose on their property, whether they would have to, you know, if they were going to build to accommodate something on the Slaker property, what do they build? How many lanes? You know, does it need to be concrete or asphalt? You know, there's a high degree of speculation involved with it that they've raised. And then the last point that concerns me is that this development comes to us not just with the Valley Green property owner, but with the Euclid property owner. And this development is only possible with the Euclid property owner agreeing to it, agreeing to allow access onto, you know, through private property to get to, you know, public roads. And, you know, we would be burdening that property as well with additional truck traffic if we impose the condition. So those are my thoughts. You know, I don't know that my thoughts are necessarily the end, you know, all that can be said, but that's where I'm at this point.
Thanks, Kevin.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Goldsmith, anything else?
Just one comment. I'm certainly not going to try to respond to 10 different points, but from a viability standpoint, there's been no other type of use that's ever been solicited by potential developers other than an ORI use. And just to the point about the road system, they have to be built to take fire trucks, which is 80,000 pounds. I have no doubt that Opus has designed all their private roads to the standard that's necessary for heavy trucks. And this will not be imposing an additional burden. And certainly, given the general traffic study that was done, it could easily be determined that the use would not significantly increase the burdens because, in fact, all the prior plans had taken all the traffic all the way to Poplar Place and around. So it's the same kind of design. The only difference is these buildings are bigger so that there's not as much room at the north end to put a road through. And they chose to do this all by private roads. You could have required that these be public roads. So we're asking to get a fair chance to have the ability to develop this site, which has no potential development with a right in, right out on Route 31. Commercial development, this is not a part of the village. This is basically small family-owned businesses along this corridor. For a 25-acre parcel to be developed, it needs a more substantial use. So commercial is out. There's no point in putting residential in the middle of the site. So you're really back to ORI being not only the highest and best use, but the logical use for the site. And we're asking you to take that consideration in considering the special use. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Dave, is there anybody else to speak on this part? Any audience comments?
No, Mayor, I don't see anyone.
Okay. I'm gonna go around the horn once and we'll just check with the trustees and if they have any other comments. Trustee Curtis, any thoughts or comments?
Nope.
Okay. Trustee Martinez?
Yeah, I honestly think that you know, Opus developing, they're really not inflicting on anybody's rights or rights to open any other businesses. You know, they went out of their way to work something out with somebody else privately. You know, it is open for them to do the same thing with the adjacent property if they needed to. I agree that this seems to be more of a private matter than it is ours from that standpoint. I would like to see them work something out, but in reality, they're not infringing on any of their original partial or access to it, in my opinion. So I'm glad there's some movement in the village that can actually benefit everybody here. I'm happy to see that.
All right, thank you. Trustee Salzar?
I don't have any comment at this time. Thank you.
Nothing. Okay, Trustee Carroll.
I like the project. I would not be inclined to force any sort of condition for the Slaker property. I don't think the comprehensive plan requires it be commercial or ORI. I think when we talked about it before, we were worried about the visual impact of having warehouses along 31 anyway. So I don't think we're really restricting anything. So I'm good with the project, but I'm not in favor of putting a condition on there.
Okay, thank you. Trustee Gately?
No further comment. I like the project.
Okay. Trustee Lowry?
Yes, well, I think it's an excellent idea. I think it's going to be a great benefit for the village to develop this project. I'm a little concerned about the north end and the noise situation regarding the residents that live. And then regarding the agreement or lack of, I guess, between the Slaker property and the Opus property, or coming up to be the Opus property, I suppose, I think should be handled between the two private parties, and that the village should kind of stay out of that. So I'm in favor of it moving forward as presented.
Okay, thank you. I agree myself with pretty much what everybody said. I'm not enforcing any restrictions either on Opus for this. I think it's a private matter. And my big thing is just protecting Kingswood Drive and the residents up there, and however they do that. Like I said, I think it might need more vegetation than what they are offering at this time. But yeah, so Mike, you need anything else or?
No, I appreciate the feedback. I'll work with the petitioner specifically on the comments regarding the additional landscaping, and also to some of the comments regarding hours and loading and unloading, and see if we can come up with something that works for everyone. So I will go back at that point. And I think the next step would be to work with Attorney Drendel to draft a PUD ordinance. Obviously, there are several ordinances required as part of this, but maybe just bringing that before the board for some sort of review prior to final consideration. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. I'll just weigh in real quick, Mayor Gaffino. Because of the amount of comments we got today and feedback, I think what Mike was saying is that we'll go back and we'll look at all of the audio from tonight and make sure that we've encompassed everything that everyone said, and then probably bring it back to
another cow. Okay. All right, great. Thank you. Okay, item 2, the TIF. Steve?
Thank you, Mayor Gaffino. Item number 2 on the agenda tonight is a tax increment financing district discussion. It's specifically about a new TIF. We had this discussion back in the fall about the idea of taking our 3 existing TIFs and combining them into one, and then leaving a portion of the existing Route 31 TIF to expire naturally in a few years. During that conversation, we just kind of gave an overview of what it would look like. This presentation includes a little bit of the financial impact, what it means revenue-wise to the village, and what it means to the taxing bodies. And Mike's going to walk us through it.
All right. Next slide, sir. Yeah, so the first few slides here, they're basically redundant from the October 19th, 2020 committee discussion where we first presented these ideas. But we just want to give a little bit of refresher too before we unleash Bill Hanna to go through the financial end of things. So actually, as of right now, the village has 3 TIF districts. The Route 31 TIF district was established in 2002. The Sperry TIF district, which comprises the orange element there, including Village Hall, established in 2005. And the North Lincoln Way TIF, which is the green area, that was established in 2011. Again, TIFs are adopted with a 23-year timeline. Next slide, please. This is just a little bit of a performance factor based upon some of the 2019 numbers. Properties in red are underperforming, and then anything green is above its value right now and actually generating positive TIF increment. Property in red being negative, it doesn't mean that it actually, it takes away from the actual balance of the TIF. It more or less, if it's under that threshold, just does not contribute at that time. So based on some of the numbers that we had working with our TIF consultants, this just kind of gives you an idea of how the overall TIF is performing. It's kind of a mix right now of properties that are generating above and below. And the one factor too is the bottom one is the amount of increment generated is significantly less than what was originally anticipated, which is part of the reason why we are looking forward to moving forward with the new TIF district to sort of accomplish some of those goals that were originally planned back in 2002. Next slide, please. This is sort of the plan that we're looking to do, the United TIF boundary. So the illustration on the left includes the portion of the Route 31 TIF, which is the red and then the purple area. The purple area, which is the area south of 88, would remain as the Route 31 TIF until its national expiration in 2025. We took a look at these properties because a lot of the development goals that were achieved south of 88. We've done some demolition work down there, some rehabilitation tip facade grants. The big project being the Smoke Tree Plaza Lane, which was done several years ago. That was a very substantial undertaking to work with those adjacent property owners to obtain the Smoke Tree as a publicly dedicated right-of-way and enhancing it to what it looks like today. And I think in the last presentation, I showed you some before and after pictures of what difference that made. So the Route 31 TIF would still remain in its natural state. It would just be all the properties south of 88, and everything north of 88 would be disconnected. And then we would be adding properties. So any of the properties that are shown in yellow would be added to the United TIF here. And then shows the red being what was the Route 31 TIF, the green being the North Lincoln Way, and the orange being the Sperry TIF. As you can see, some of the properties that would be adding would be the Euclid property as well to capture some of the EAV that would be as part of the Opus development potentially. A big one being Block 1. This property originally was supposed to be in a TIF, but I think it was actually taken out due to some concerns from area residents. So we would be proposing to include this back in the TIF. And also too, some of the properties that are, in proximity to State and Route 25 there, just so they have the opportunity too for any sort of redevelopment activity and with the Belson property up there. And also too, just taking advantage of the TIF facade grant program. So the illustration on the right would be what would be the United TIF boundary line after everything would be said and done as we're looking to move forward. Next slide, please. Again, this is just more of a verbal indication as what I just explained, combining the three TIFs, adding those specific properties, Euclid, Block 1, the areas adjacent to Village Hall and 25 and 56. And also to the Route 31 would remain south of 88 until its national expiration in 2025. Next slide, please. With that, I'll go ahead and hand these specifics over to Finance Director Bill Hanna.
Thanks, Mike. As Mike said, I think the last time this topic was discussed back in the fall, there were some questions about what the financial impact would be to the village and the other taxing bodies by sort of combining the TIF districts as they exist right now and letting the southern portion sort of expire naturally. So we tried to create just one chart here that kind of tries to summarize and give some more information. The first column on the left is the current fiscal year that we're in right now. And as noted on one of Mike's slides earlier, the Route 31 TIF district generates about 520,000 of increment, Sperry about 7,500, and North Lincoln Way about 34,000. So in total, we're receiving from our three TIF districts right now about $563,000 a year. Now, the next 5 years going forward, those are the 5 years, we did 5 years specifically because that's when the Route 31 TIF district, as it stands right now, is expired, is expected to reach its 23-year life. And at that point, the TIF district would no longer exist. So based on some of the discussions that we've had in the timing, the next column from the left there where it says 2020 and fiscal year 21-22, you can see at top we have two scenarios. One, if we do nothing, and two, if we were to combine the TIF districts at the bottom. So that's where you see the difference in some of the expected increment that may be generated. Now, some of these are really illustrated projections, but it's really just to drive home a couple of key points. Because we are under the assumption based on timing that 2020 tax levy year would actually be the new base year for a united TIF district. 2021 and fiscal 22-23 would actually be the first year that we would see changes in the TIF increment that we would receive from a TIF district. So you can see the top chart shows our increment increasing gradually every year. And that impact year is really in that 22-23 fiscal year where the Route 31 TIF district increment is projected to decrease from 530,000 to 360,000. And that's because, as we discussed before, the southern half of the 88 Route 31 TIF district would be allowed to remain, and that'd be where we would receive the $360,000. But the north part of the Route 31 TIF district, those base values would be reset. So we would essentially be releasing that increment to the taxing bodies. And you can see that down there at the bottom of that second column, increment returned. I think there might be some words cut off there, but essentially the taxing bodies right now would receive $194,000 as an illustrated projection of TIF property tax revenue that they would have the opportunity to reclaim with their tax levy process. So in a nutshell, if you look at the impact to the village TIF districts over the next 5 years, you can see if we do nothing, the illustrative impact is about, we will receive about $3 million over the next 5 years from our 3 TIF districts. If we implement this sort of united TIF plan, we would receive, as an illustrated projection, about 2.2 million instead. You can see that on that far column there.
Hey, Bill?
Yes.
What benefit are we getting by combining them then? The revenue is going to go down. And when the revenue goes down, that's less opportunity for our businesses to take advantage of the TIF grants.
Sure. So the advantage is that over time, a new TIF district, you reset the 23-year life on it. And that line where it says new TIF, I mean, that number could actually be greater. We just don't know at this point going forward.
But looking at current economic conditions, sorry to interrupt, but looking at current economic conditions, I mean, should we really be reducing opportunities for our businesses to take advantage by reducing the revenue? I mean, we're coming out of the pandemic. We need to get going with economic recovery. I mean, is now the right time to be doing this?
Well, I think this is sort of a long-term redevelopment goal. So, as Mike has indicated and other people have indicated, a lot of the goals of the Route 31 TIF district really didn't have a chance to take off. And essentially this would sort of reset that timeline to a new 23 years for a new TIF district. So what you're not seeing on the chart is the following essentially 19 years that this new TIF district would be in place and have the opportunity to provide more redevelopment time for businesses, within that new TIF district area. So I think given the amount of increment that we've received and would still receive, I think, and Mike can tell me if I'm wrong, but I think there would be enough increment to kind of continue to do some of the programs that we've been doing to help businesses on Route 31, but also take into account the long-term redevelopment benefits by forming and resetting the 23-year TIF for that new area, if that answers your question.
Yes, thank you.
Welcome. And again, these are just really illustrated projections. You can see in this illustrated projection, we would be returning about $800,000 to the other taxing districts, school districts, library, park district, even the village of North Aurora would receive some benefit. and that would be returned to those districts sooner rather than later over that 4-year period.
Bill, if I could add one more thing about that too, that extra time that the new TIF would get us, 18 to 19 years, it also gives an economic tool in the sense that if someone wanted to develop a parcel and they wanted to enter into a TIF incentive agreement with the village, we would have the ability to essentially rebate increment that they generate from their development that isn't currently in the TIF already. So it actually is a way that villages use to attract new businesses to develop in a TIF district.
Yes, that's definitely one of the ways that that can work. And I think the purpose here too was to show that, through this process and disconnecting all those properties from the current Route 31 TIF district through this process would be returning some increment, to the taxing bodies at some point in the next 2 years.
Hey, Bill, what's the process if we would let this die? And, 2024, what happens there? How do you start another one, or what's versus doing what we might be doing here by redrawing it and starting over now?
Sure. So if we did nothing, and I'm assuming, Mr. Mayor, this is your question, if we did nothing, we would receive kind of the increment that we've been receiving right now, could be slightly more or less, until that Route 31 TIF district expires in 2024 levy year. Again, we did the 5-year window because that's when that Route 31 TIF district is expected to expire. The Sperry TIF district would continue for a few years after that, and the North Lincoln Way TIF several more years after that. But obviously, under this proposed reorganization, those two smaller TIFs would be essentially dissolved and incorporated into the new TIF, as illustrated below. So essentially, if we did nothing, Mr. Mayor, we would see the Route 31 TIF district sort of just finish, and that would essentially be that. And under this proposal, the actual amounts that would actually carry forward beyond 2024 with the new TIF.
Thanks.
So I guess that's a lot of information. I know, I think, we wanted to kind of put it in just one slide up there to see if there were any questions about the financial impact, short-term or long-term. And I guess any other questions regarding the proposal to create the United TIF district.
No, I don't have any questions. I think I'd like to see us continue the TIF.
Anybody else? Any thoughts?
In the long run, it'll generate more revenue for the village. Is that what you're saying, Bill?
Yeah, I think there's a short-term impact where we're returning some increment to the other taxing bodies sooner, which is benefit to them. But I think long-term, at starting a new 23-year clock, essentially, you're significantly expanding, the opportunity to redevelop that corridor with additional TIF increment.
Yeah, I'd like to see it restructured too. Yeah.
What happens to the money that's in the fund now? Does it get transferred to the new TIF?
Sure. So a couple comments on that. The current Route 31 TIF district would continue to exist. So as that increment is received, it would continue to funnel into that Route 31 TIF district, which we call, as we've been discussing this, Old TIF. So the area south of 88. And based on, because of based on the boundaries of new TIF and old TIF and different things, there's some opportunities to use those funds in different areas of old TIF as well as new TIF. So there's flexibility there, to keep doing certain things based on the boundaries of the TIF district.
To another point too, just to kind of summarize about the reason that you're looking for, as Bill put it, the long term as opposed to the short term. When you're looking at it, there's 3 things that could go into effect by extending the TIF as far as the properties and how EAV will generate higher. And one of them I mentioned earlier is any undeveloped properties that are in that TIF now have that new clock of 19 years from the time that they're being assessed at, we'll call it essentially zero. And then once a building is put up or whatnot, that new tax goes on the roll for that entire 18 or 19 years. So that's, you're taking a property maybe generating zero in taxes or very little in taxes, and you're extending that new building and what its assessed value is for an extended period of time. The other is obviously there's natural progression. So you'll have just properties naturally accrue, they'll go up, and hopefully over time as improvements are made in the TIF, property values in the TIF will rise and that increment will grow over time as well. And then the third part is you saw that map where half of the properties, for lack of a better, percentage, were in the red, meaning when the TIF was set 20 years ago, they are currently below the value that they were assessed at that time, meaning they're generating zero increment to the TIF district right now. In theory, if you start developing properties around them and you give it that 20 years, those properties, they're going to be reset at that new value. They're generating zero now. Hopefully some of those red properties will start generating increment for 19 additional years or so.
Okay.
All right.
Very good.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, moving on. I guess item number 3, name the silo. Steve?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just one before we go on to that very quickly. So there is a next step to that process, and Mike and Bill and I will work on that, and that's getting our TIF consultant started on the actual process of putting us on a timeline, and that would require us to bring approvals back to the village board in the very near future. That being said, item number 3 on the agenda tonight is the naming of the silo. As the board knows, we finished the silo restoration and illumination project at the end of the year last year, and there was a comment made at the last board meeting to discuss naming the silo. It was thrown out by Trustee Gately as potentially naming it Berman Tower. The board asked what the process to name a structure or a property would be, and essentially for historical records and formal approval, what we thought would be a resolution would probably be the best course of action. Tonight it's in front of you to have that discussion on whether or not to name it and what to name it, to verify that the board is in agreement on one particular path. And then whatever that is, we would take it back to resolution at a following board meeting to approve it.
Yeah, I'd like to see it Berman Tower at the resolution. I think that would be appropriate.
And
Hopefully.
yeah. Did you say there's a plaque going to be then put on the tower identifying it as Berman Tower?
So as of right now, we have, as part of our land agreement with Harners, we gave them a plaque thanking them for dedicating the land for the project. And what we were thinking of doing is, we didn't have a formal ceremony or anything because of COVID. But we are thinking about putting a plaque out there just in general at the site that was going to say, Village Restoration and Illumination Silo Project 2020 with the board's name on it. At this point, we haven't done that plaque yet. We were going to do it in the spring. So yes, if the silo was given a formal name, we would just put that on the plaque.
I think it's great. I think it's a great idea to name it Berman. He's the guy that thought it up, that pushed it, worked on it, and promoted it all along. So I think it's very fitting that we name it after ex-mayor Berman.
Yes, I agree.
I agree.
I think it's the least we could do for Dale. We have streets named in behalf of other mayors, so I would like to see that.
I agree as well. I think, he's gave probably 40 years at a village, besides spearheading the redevelopment of the silo there. So seems fitting. So
I think it's a fitting tribute to Dale.
yeah,
I agree.
Agreed.
Okay.
Okay, so I will bring that to the next agenda with a resolution.
All right. Thank you.
Very good.
All right. Item 4, waste hauler. Steve.
Okay, item number 4 is a waste hauler RFP. So this one, it's kind of complicated, so I'm going to go as quickly as possible a little bit of the backstory. So we have a 5-year agreement with Waste Management. Their contract was due to expire at the end, or is due to expire at the end of May. We went, as we typically would do, we took this item to the village board at the services committee back in the fall to kind of get some advice on whether to move forward with a renegotiation or go to a formal process to select pricing from other vendors. At that time, Waste Management had provided us 2 proposals that we did show the committee, and it was the committee's direction to go to a formal process. Just for a small background on the process, we typically, or at least in my career path, I've always chosen the RFP process versus a bid for garbage services. Because of the RFP, it's not just about pricing, it's also about the total package that is offered by a vendor. So it could be the time, the day of services, the amount of pricing for toter versus stickers. I mean, there's a whole bunch of different scenarios that are reviewed. But essentially it is like a bid in the sense that it is a public process. And so with that, what we did and what the committee's feedback was in the fall was to essentially request 3 types of pricing. The committee made it clear that they liked the sticker program that we currently use. So what the RFP did was it allowed, first of all, just to get some more bidders, people to submit proposals. Currently have 1-day pickup. We allowed up to 3-day pickup so that some of the smaller companies might have an opportunity to provide pricing. And it basically just asked for pricing on 3 programs. One was our current program, and that would essentially be stickers for, a can of garbage and yard waste, and for bulk items, and a toter rental as an option. That would be your 96-gallon toter that you can rent for garbage. And 2 cleanup days, one in the spring and one in the fall is what we've historically had here. So that was one pricing we asked for. The other 2 pricing proposals were alternate 1, which was a sticker program as its base, the option for a toter rental, and 1 cleanup day in exchange of 2 cleanup days. And the idea being that if cleanup days really drives the price of the garbage program up, maybe reducing it to 1 would actually lower the overall pricing. And then alternate 2 was, once again, the sticker program, the ability to rent the toter, 1 cleanup day, and then the opportunity, instead of a second cleanup day, to have 2 weeks in the spring where you could have free landscaping collection, so free yard waste. And with that being said, we put the bid out, or the RFP, and we got 5 companies to submit, which good in the sense that last time we had 3, or excuse me, we only had, we had 2 or 3 last time, and this time we got 5. And out of the ones that we looked at, 1 didn't meet the qualifications. So really, and I'm about to walk through those proposals. 1 company submitted a Friday, Saturday collection, and we made it clear in the RFP and in the addendum that no Saturday or Sunday collections were allowed. All garbage has to be picked up Monday through Friday. So if you, in front of you tonight in your memo, I have, there is a section that goes over our current garbage program just for reference. If you have any questions about our current program, once again, it's pretty basic. Everyone gets a recycling toter. You have to put a sticker on each can you put out each week. You have the option to rent a toter. You have to put a sticker on any item that doesn't fit in the can or the toter that's outside under 50 pounds. You have to put 4 stickers on anything that's over 50 pounds outside of your can. And 4 stickers for white goods, which are essentially appliances. So if you go through the pricing proposals, I'm going to just beat to the chase a little bit here. We're going to go, the very last page is what we did was we put together a 4-month pricing comparison. And Dave Hansen, who's one of our analysts who's on the call tonight, he did a nice job of taking all the proposals, and our current pricing with Waste Management is based on, we get it in thirds. So you get a bill every 4 months. So what we did is that essentially covers 17 weeks of collection. And we put together a scenario to illustrate what pricing would mean for an average resident. using the idea that if you use a sticker program, the average person puts 1 can of garbage out a week, 1 bulk item, and 1 white good during that entire 17-week period. And then if you rent a toter, like some of our residents do, you have a flat 4-month cost for the toter in here, plus 1 bulk item and plus 1 white good. Now, to put that in reference before we go through this chart, according to our current waste hauler, Waste Management, they've stated that 79%, so 4 out of every 5 residents essentially use the sticker program, and only 1 out of 5 rent the toter. So the sticker pricing being one of the more important scenarios. So when you look through that pricing chart, you see 3 sections, and each one is the pricing proposals. The first one is our current program and how it compares to the prices we receive from the 5 companies. Alternate one is that one where we have 1 cleanup day instead of 2. And then the last one is 1 cleanup day and free yard waste instead of 2 cleanup days. And if you see the sticker pricing, what we really found out here is the garbage companies are making a real effort to try to get people off of sticker programs. It was brought up during the process if we would allow a toter only proposal, and we said no, because the guidelines we heard from the committee was that the sticker program was paramount to the village, that was something we wanted to absolutely hold on to. So with that, we said everyone had to submit a sticker program, but use toters as a rental as an option. When you go through this, what we found too is some of the companies actually want to charge a base price for the sticker program. So what you'll see is in their individual pricing above, if you go to, and I'll look at Waste Management, and if I look at Flood Brothers, their proposals, if you look at the sticker prices, they also have an additional $4 fee for Flood Brothers a month. And then Waste Management has one here at $10.32. So essentially everybody who uses a sticker program would have to pay that first initial base fee and then still purchase stickers every time they put a can out. So that's why we broke this chart down in the very bottom of your memo to really show you what the actual pricing would be if you in fact followed 1 can a week as your metric. And so when you look at that, the other interesting thing too, and I know I'm throwing a lot of information out, but it's a very long RFP. So when you go through this, there really wasn't as much variance in the pricing for alternating to 1 cleanup day or for switching 1 cleanup day for landscaping pickup in the spring. Some of the idea could be that if you get rid of 1 cleanup day, maybe the garbage companies just assume that more people will put out more stuff on that 1 cleanup, and they'll just, instead of splitting it in 2, they'll just stockpile it and put it all out at once. I don't know that to be true. That's just kind of a theory that we have. But if you look at the pricing here, in the memo, we said the best core pricing was probably submitted by group. And the reason we said core pricing is if 80% of your users, 79% of your users are sticker, they have the lowest sticker price and they have the second lowest toter price. The only thing is they're more expensive on bulk items in our current program and white goods. They would require 5 stickers instead of 4. So at this time, that is a lot of information. I will be more than happy to answer any questions you have. What we're looking for out of this discussion is whether or not to come forward to the board with a potential 5-year contract for whichever company the board selects.
Well, I just want to know why Waste Management is pricing themselves out of our business.
Yeah.
It's just, I mean, they're not even competitive with the other 4. I mean, group by far on every metric to me is the best choice because we're keeping our sticker people happy and we're giving the people with the toter the option. And I like alternative 2 with the cleanup day and the free 2 weeks of yard waste. I mean, they're not charging us for the additional yard waste like the other competitors are.
Yeah, I'd like to weigh in on that too as well, Steve. I did some calculating and figuring some things out. And first of all, a white, if you take 17 weeks or what is that, a fourth of the year?
A third of the year.
I don't think we put out 4 white item, refrigerators, dryers, washers. I don't think there's 4 a year. So that's a very rare kind of thing, I think, for most people. And then on the over 50 thing, I did a calculation considering 4 over 50 items throughout the year. And by far, Groot came out as the cheapest and most efficient of all of them, despite the little bit higher for the bulk items and the white goods. So I'm with Laura on this, that I think Groot's our best deal here, is my opinion.
Well, Groot was, except for one company, Lakeshore, Groot had the second highest bulk item price. But to go back to what you just said, the real question is, how much do people put out bulk items when they already have amnesty days, and so or what we call cleanup days? So that's the issue. I mean, I know as a garbage user myself, I do put bulk items out once in a while, but I also put stuff out on cleanup days in the spring and the fall. So it really comes down to, for this scenario, we bid one bulk item and one white good, and quite honestly, pricing wise, they're fairly interchangeable. Most of them are the exact same price. Each person who submitted basically has, in most cases, the pricing for a white good sticker and a bulk item sticker are the same. So the number of stickers required. So if you look at that, it really just comes down to the core pricing is the sticker program price, the toter price.
Yep.
And then going from there, how much do you think the bulk item and white goods make sense?
Trustee Gately, thoughts?
Yes, I mean, where is Groot from? How are their trucks? I mean, are they going to be able to pick up all of our trash in a day or 2 days? I mean, I don't know. I mean, where else do they do work at? I mean, where are they from? You know, I'd like to know. To me, that's kind of important to make sure that they actually get the trash picked up. I mean, that's a question I'd have.
Mm-hmm.
Dave Hanson, you're on the phone call, and I actually think we have a representative from Waste Management and Groot on the Zoom meeting right now. So if you'd like to weigh in and ask, but I believe Groot actually does work in Aurora now, and I believe they actually they do a few towns out here.
Yeah.
I know they have a station out in West Chicago, and I think they might be working out of Aurora as well. Dave, is Josh Molnar on the call?
Yes, he is. So
I am.
Unmute him. Yeah.
Josh, if you would like to answer that question on behalf of Groot, go ahead.
Yes. Good evening. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Great. Thank you for letting me be here tonight. Appreciate the question, and most of all, we appreciate the opportunity to earn your business. To answer the question, I guess in general, we've been operating in the Chicagoland area for over 100 years in terms of the Groot name. We haul over 80 communities. Some of the area ones you'd be familiar with would be Aurora, Naperville, West Chicago, Oswego, to name a few. Our barn is out of Aurora, so we are very close. The opportunity when this RFP came out really stood out to us as it's a good fit to our operation. So we haul quite a few communities. We've hauled a lot of communities for 30, 40, 50 years. And we're excited to be a part, or at least have an opportunity to earn your business. So any questions you have, I'd be happy to answer.
Hey, Josh, is that the place you work out of Aurora, is that the former Republic site off of Sullivan?
Yes, it is. We acquired both two divisions off of Republic, both in Elgin and Aurora. So we've got a deeper footprint in this area. So one of the reasons why this really appealed to us when the RFP came across our desk.
So are you able to remove all of our trash in one day with all your trucks?
We propose to do it over 3 days, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday.
So then we'd be splitting up different days for different residents.
Correct.
Okay. And what do we do now, Steve? Isn't it all one day? They come and pick everything up?
We do. We have 1 day pickup on Fridays. As stated earlier, the reason we broke it up into multiple day pickup is some of the waste haulers don't have the ability to have enough trucks in the town for 1 day pickup in some communities. So throughout my career, whenever I've gone through a process like this, I've heard from some of the mid-sized companies and smaller companies that they are only able to bid on certain size towns if they have multiple day options.
So let's just say currently Friday is like Thanksgiving. So that means that same deal would apply. Then instead of on Friday, come on Saturday and pick up our trash? Or is that when I wait till Monday?
So Groot right now is proposing Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So assuming there was a holiday on Monday, everybody would just be pushed back a day, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. If a holiday fell, like I think 4th of July fell on a Wednesday recently. And if that was the case, 2/3 of the town would be picked up on Monday, Tuesday. The other third would be pushed back from Wednesday to Thursday.
I'm fine with that. I mean, just to save 36% below waste management, I don't care what day you pick up my trash.
Well, and it's not like you're alternating the resident. The residents are going to have the same day every week. So what difference does it make if your neighbor on the other side of town is a different day?
I mean, there's no doubt that it's
Curious, I was curious about a holiday, how it would affect, that's all. I'm not a company that's more competitive. I just wanted that question answered. That's all.
Yeah, it's definitely for notices and newsletters and on Facebook and website, it's always easy to say everyone's on the same day, everyone's getting pushed back, or you're not getting pushed back. In this case, we haven't worked it out directly with any of the proposals yet, but each one of them is required to essentially create a plan for how they would lay out the town in sections to do multiple day pickups if they chose to submit a proposal. Like I said, Dave Hansen can answer this in case I get it wrong, but I believe Groot's proposal had it broken up very similar to how we break up our policing, and which is east of the river, then the river to Randall, and then Randall West.
Correct.
So like the holiday falls on Monday, then everybody's pushed back a day.
Correct. And if the holiday falls on any of those 3 days, whoever got their garbage picked up, so it falls on a Tuesday, Monday still gets Monday pickup, Tuesday and Wednesday just get pushed back a day.
And how is the yard waste? Is it the same way where we put it out in the, or bag it and they take it? Is that the same deal?
Correct. It's still by a sticker for a bag, and everything is still the same. Free leaf pickup stays the same in the fall. The big issue would be is, and it's not a big issue, but we put it in we had it in our contract last time as well, but we leave it up to the actual company to offer a yard waste seasonal toter for residents if they want at their discretion as well. Some companies will do that where they actually allow somebody to pay a flat fee for a toter, which is the size of 3 garbage cans essentially, of putting out yard clippings every single week.
So when we say define yard waste, could they like small little branches be considered yard waste? And how would is that free? Does that fall under the 2 weeks in April?
Are you talking about, okay, just the 2 weeks in April? Because just for reference, so the way it works now is if you get it in the long bag and it's under 50 pounds, it's 1 sticker.
Right.
If it's branches and you cut them to a certain length, I think it's 3 feet or maybe 4. And then you bundle it for 50 pounds or less, it's a sticker per bundle. Dave, can you answer that question, Dave?
I don't believe it falls underneath that. I guess that could be a discussion we can have with the waste hauler as we finalize the contract.
Do you have the actual language that was in front of you that was in the actual RFP?
Let me double check real quick.
So then the 2 weeks in April free would be just like leads.
Or I don't know, anything, right? Anything green, I would think.
That's what I'm just double checking it right
And
now.
then
I want to make sure.
Is it unlimited? Those 2 weeks? Can you have 10 bags out there? Or is it limited at some type?
Hang on 1 second.
Are we seeing a lot of requests to have yard waste picked up in the spring? Because I mean, people really like the 2 cleanup days. Is there a big call for yard waste cleanup that I'm unaware of?
I wouldn't say a ton, but we do get complaints in the spring every year. What happens is with the leaf pickup program, our program typically ends about a week short of December, just because of the way we have to transition our trucks into plowing. And then the waste haulers, it depends on where they take their compost to and then their leaves. So a lot of times those places shut down at the end of November as well. So what ends up happening is, and the classic is oak trees. Oak trees hold their leaves very long. A lot of times they drop their leaves in December. People will go out there, they don't have the access to the free village program. So they might have 10 bags of leaves that they're sitting on, and then they have to pay $4 per bag to put it out in the spring for $40.
Or they don't do anything with it. I think this would promote cleaning up your yard, and I've had people ask me about it. They thought one cleanup day would suffice. You know, you can just put it all out once instead of keeping it, you know, twice. But this maybe would promote, you know, some pride in property. Some people won't do any, if it's not free, they'll just leave it out in the yard. So this way, if we have snow late November and we don't get everything picked up, this would kind of incentivize or promote, you know, clean up your yard. That was my thought.
Could we possibly get 2 cleanup days and trash the yard waste?
Yeah.
No, the way it was written was that it was only in one option where it was one cleanup day. And essentially the trade-off was instead of a cleanup day, you had the 2-week pickup.
Okay, all right, that's fine.
Well, could Public Works pick up leaves in the spring for 2 weeks?
I mean, that's something we can look at. We've never offered that. It doesn't mean we can't do it. I don't know operationally what we're doing with our equipment at that time, but I can certainly talk to John.
If I could clarify real quick, in those 2 weeks for under our proposal, it would include bundled brush.
Okay, good. That's a good one. That's people are.
That's important.
Is that unlimited, or is it one bundle, or how's that work?
As long as it's properly prepared and bundled with the restriction, you know, no less or no more than 4 feet.
Right. But I mean, you could put 10 bundles out or whatever. It's not a problem. Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
Thank you.
I think the residents would be thrilled to have the price of the sticker per garbage can go down, because that's what most of us do every week. And if people knew that there was one cleanup day a year, they would save all of that stuff for the one day of the year that it's free, and they would put it out. Now they have 2, so they save it and they put it out in 2. So I don't know if having one free cleanup day is going to be that impactful. I think people will just save their stuff and put it out in that one day. But I think people would be thrilled to have their sticker price go down for the garbage they have picked up every week.
I'll tell you where this where the yard waste really came into play, Trustee Carroll, to your question. It isn't necessarily just the LEAP program. Where we get calls is at least once a year, there's a storm that comes through town that rips through and knocks a bunch of branches off of people's trees, small ones. And instead of having to bundle all those and put individual stickers, people are always expecting, you know, why don't we have a brush pickup? And, you know, I wasn't here years ago when that conversation may have taken place of brush pickup versus leaf pickup. And, you know, the village has all the equipment for leaf pickup, but even the towns around us contract out, and it's expensive for brush pickup. So we've always gone back to, well, you can put your brush out at the curb. It would just be another opportunity. If people kept their brush for the winter months and they wanted to put it out in the spring, they could.
No, that's a good option, especially with the brush. I like that idea. People always want, you know, they always talk about their twigs to be removed.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But I will say this, there's no doubt people love 2 cleanup days. So I'm not trying to make the decision difficult. I am telling you that when cleanup days come out, we get so many calls about people, you know, verifying the day, what times, you know, what you know, who's when, what day am I in. So definitely people enjoy the cleanup days.
Yeah. Years ago, it was once a year. So, I mean, they just have to get used to that. But I think that yard waste is going to be a big benefit for people, I think.
I think we're going to hear about it. Because I just don't think there, I mean,
it's not like they don't have any, you know.
Right.
It's something to get used to maybe, but something to think about.
You know, I don't want to, I'm not trying to branch off. I know it's late, but I can't remember if we took it to the board and had a full discussion years ago about this, but internally at one point we were looking at, you know, a brush pickup, and it's really, to have a program like that is pretty intense. So most of the times, like the villages around us will hire private companies to do that. There's only a limited number of companies that do it. And so the problem is sometimes they may not even be available if we were looking for a contractor to be able to do brush pickup throughout the community. And then what some towns do is they actually charge residents directly on their water bill for that brush collection. So then you run into the whole, you know, are you charging every resident? How do you weed out who's paying for the program and using it and who's not? Everyone's getting a
Yeah,
check.
Batavia does that. Batavia charges for leaf pickup too. Yeah, it's on their water bill. So
I'm good either way. I mean, I don't want to belabor the point.
Yeah.
I think Groot came in much lower. I think it's, for me, that would be who I would go with.
Steve, what's the transition? Let's say we go with Groot. What's the transition? How does that work? Phasing out one and bringing in another?
Sure. So there's actual provisions in the RFP that explain that they have to essentially honor the existing stickers from the existing company for up to a month. Dave, is there anything else beyond that I'm missing?
Yeah, it's up to 30 days. So with the contract starting June 1st, you can sell your stickers back to Waste Management until June 30th. And then the first 4 weeks or the first 28 days, Groot would honor Waste Management stickers if you were not to turn them in. And then for toter transition, the last day it looks like would be, if we were to transition, May 28th would be Friday. So that'd be Waste Management's last pickup. So they'd pick up your toter a few days after that. And Groot should have your toters to you probably a week or so before that. So the transition doesn't seem too difficult. And we can definitely monitor and make sure we're on with Groot and Waste Management to ensure there's no problems with that.
In my prior community, I was there when they switched to a toter only program. And during that process, there was some, I wouldn't call it confusion, but there was some concerns that came up that I think, at least at this point in my career, I'll be prepared for a little bit more, which would be, some people might not know where to store 2 cans or may not have room to store 2 cans or put them, they could be violating our codes by keeping 1 can outside. In those cases, we just tell the code officers at that point, because of the transition, there's going to be a rough period for 2-3 weeks where people are probably going to have their cans outside for a little while if they can't store them all inside or behind the facade of the house. So there's little hiccups like that, but most of the time they just roll them through in a multi-day process in different sections of town, section at a time.
And Groot will provide recycling toters too, right? At no
Correct.
cost.
Everyone still gets the exact same, everyone still gets a recycling toter. I don't know if Groot it's either a 64 or a 65. We allow either one. So, but right now we have a 64. So they're going to be the same size toters for recycling. Rentals are still going to be 96 gallon or 95 gallon. So same size toters for garbage. Groot added on, I believe in their proposal, they actually offered an additional option, which would be that if a resident didn't want the 96 gallon toter, but still wanted to rent one, I believe they put in their proposal that they would offer a 65, let me look it up right here, a 65 gallon. It's funny, so that's why I keep saying 95 or 96, because different waste haulers use 95 and some use 96 for some reason. Same thing with 64 and 65. So Groot has an option for $17.99 a month, where if people wanted a smaller toter, they can have a few dollars reduced price.
Okay, sounds good.
Sounds good to me.
Sounds great.
Yep.
Okay, so
Great job.
Well, I
Great
think
job.
I have the company, but I want to make sure I have direction on which program of the 3 you want.
Alternate 2.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Alternate 2.
Good
Okay.
job, Dave Hansen. Nice work on that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mayor.
Very nice. Also, you too, Steve. So,
Thanks.
all right. So, anything else come before us?
No, that was it.
All right. Motion adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Bye.
Take care. Good night.
Good job, Mark.
Good night.
Good night.